Last month, Kilmer Armando Abrego Garcia was deported to El Salvador in a direct violation of a 2019 court order. While the White House, at least originally, admitted that this was a mistake, they've since doubled down and are now apparently resisting a Supreme Court ruling requiring them to, quote, facilitate his return, depending on how you interpret the word facilitate. So in this video, we're going to take a look at this spat between Trump and the courts, whether it amounts to a constitutional crisis, and why, either way, it should worry any American concerned about the rule of law. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So we think the best way to explain this story is just to do it chronologically. According to court documents, in 1995, Kilmer Armando Abrego Garcia was born in El Salvador, which back then had one of the highest gang-related violence rates in the world. A gang called Barrio 18 started extorting money from his family and threatened to kill him. So in 2011, Abrego Garcia fled El Salvador and entered the US illegally. Abrego Garcia then made his way to Maryland, where his brother, Cesar, who had fled El Salvador a few years earlier, was now living as a US citizen. In 2018, Abrego Garcia moved in with his then-girlfriend Jennifer, a US citizen, and she became pregnant with his child a few months later. In March 2019, however, during the first Trump administration, Abrego Garcia was arrested while looking for construction work in the parking lot of a Home Depot. Once they realized Abrego Garcia was in the country illegally, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, brought removal proceedings against him. And this is where things get a bit murky. Abrego Garcia applied to be released on bail while his case was being decided, but ICE opposed this application, saying that Abrego Garcia was a member of a gang called MS-13, and therefore too dangerous to be allowed bail. Now, this claim seems to stem from a document written a few hours after Abrego Garcia's arrest by a local detective in Maryland. We haven't actually seen this document, so we don't know exactly what's in it, but we can get a sense of it by inferring from statements made by the judge overseeing Abrego Garcia's case in 2019, and more recent comments made by his current attorney. In the document, the detective seems to have essentially given two pieces of evidence. Firstly, that Abrego Garcia was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie, which are apparently classic MS-13 attire. And second, a testimony from a confidential informant advising that Abrego Garcia was an active member of MS-13's so-called Westerns clique. But neither of these pieces of evidence really seem sufficient. Obviously, wearing a Bulls hat isn't a crime, and MS-13's Western clique operates out of New York, a state that Abrego Garcia had never lived in. Abrego Garcia's attorney at the time noticed these discrepancies, but when he pressed for more information, he was told that A, the police had no incident report for Abrego Garcia's arrest, and B, the detective that had authored the document had been suspended for providing confidential information to a sex worker in exchange for, well, sex. Nonetheless, the judge overseeing the case sided with ICE, and Abrego Garcia remained incarcerated for most of 2019. During this time in custody, Abrego Garcia got married to Jennifer and applied for asylum. Now, his asylum claim was unsuccessful, but in October, another judge granted his request for withholding of removal, which essentially meant that while he couldn't seek legal permanent residence in the US, Abrego Garcia could not be deported back to El Salvador because of the risk of persecution from Barrio 18. Since then, once a year, Abrego Garcia has checked in with immigration officials, as is standard procedure for individuals with withholding of removal status, with his last check-in coming in on January 2nd of this year. During this time, he also obtained a work permit, was employed full-time as a sheet metal apprentice, and was pursuing a vocational license at the University of Maryland. That was until March 12th, when Abrego Garcia was pulled over by ICE officers, told that his immigration status had changed, and 3 days later was deported to El Salvador, where he, along with roughly 200 other Salvadorian and Venezuelan deportees, was imprisoned without trial in Sicot, a brutal maximum security prison built by El Salvador's president Nayib Bukele as part of his crackdown on El Salvador's gangs. While Trump's administration originally claimed that Abrego Garcia, along with the other detainees, was a gang member, he had been convicted of no crimes in either country. On top of that, the fact that the ICE officers who picked him up didn't have a warrant meant that obviously Abrego Garcia's deportation to El Salvador violated the 2019 ruling against doing exactly that. And on April 5th, after both ICE and DOJ officials admitted that deportation was a mistake, a federal judge, Paul Aginis, ordered the White House to facilitate and effectuate his return by midnight, Monday, April 7th. The White House said that they couldn't do this, though, because Abrego Garcia was now in El Salvador, which meant that it had become a foreign policy issue, and the court couldn't tell the president how to conduct foreign policy. The case then went to the Supreme Court, which unanimously ruled that the White House still had to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. While this might sound like a win for Abrego Garcia, the Supreme Court also said that the White House was under no obligation to, quote, effectuate his return. Basically, the court said, sure, we can't force you to pursue a certain foreign policy, but please try and get him back. Now, to be frank, Trump could get him back if he actually wanted to. After all, it's pretty clear that Bukele does whatever Trump wants. But at a press conference with Bukele and the White House earlier this week, Trump made it clear that he had no intention of doing this.
The Supreme Court, Steve, was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0.
In our favor.
In our favor, against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time. No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
The question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people.
While Judge Aginis has since required the White House to detail the steps it's taking to guarantee Abrego Garcia's return, if Bukele just plays along with Trump's game and refuses to release him, it doesn't look like there's much the courts can do. And this should worry all Americans, even the most ardent immigration skeptics, because the White House's position here has at least two slightly terrifying implications. First, the government has just completely ignored a standing court order preventing Abrego Garcia's deportation to El Salvador in the first place, and they just don't seem fussed about it. In fact, the DOJ lawyer who admitted that Abrego Garcia's deportation had been done in error has since been suspended, and the White House is now doubling down. On Monday, Stephen Miller claimed that he was not mistakenly sent to El Salvador. This was the right person sent to the right place. Second, as Justice Sotomayor noted earlier this week, the implication of all of this is that the government can deport anyone, citizens and non-citizens alike, to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. And unless you file your legal action super quick before the plane's taken off, there's nothing you can do to get back, even if your deportation was illegal. Ultimately, while there's some debate as to whether Trump is defying the court order outright here, in other words, whether the US is already in a full-scale constitutional crisis, he's clearly treating it with some disdain, and a constitutional crisis feels somewhat inevitable in the near term. Regardless, in 2025, one thing is certain. We can expect the news cycle to continue being dominated by these same major figures. But who's the most influential? Well, in the most recent edition of our magazine, Too Long, we find out. That's because this 72-page issue runs down our official ranking of the world's most influential people, a vote that saw the TLDR team and more than 15,000 of you casting ballots. In the magazine, you'll learn the entire ranking. Plus, we've written articles about all of the top 25, discussing how they wield their influence and how they interact with and shape our world, including Modi's struggles in South India, how Elon took over, Giorgia Meloni's battles with the Italian judiciary, and Trump's monumental comeback story. Also, if you want to dive even deeper, the premium edition of the magazine also gets you access to bonus videos. That includes the team debating their rankings of the top 25, with it getting pretty heated at times.
We could potentially have a monumental jump on our hands.
Yeah.
Hands up for leapfrogging into sixth.
The most powerful European country, the second biggest economy, the nuclear power that is... The nuclear power!
Yeah.
We also recorded the team reacting to the audience's ranking, so you can find out what they really think about your votes. It's not just about the most influential people though. Too Long also contains articles about the current state of the UK, the new right in Europe, and if peace can really hold in Gaza, along with a whole variety of other stories. Too Long truly is some of our very best journalism, with the audience consistently saying that previous issue vastly outstripped their expectations. So if you want a copy too, head over to toolong.news to pick one up. And if you never want to miss an issue, you can subscribe, which gets you a 20% discount on every issue as long as you stay a subscriber. Plus, just this week, if you use code INFLUENCE, you'll get an additional £3 off any subscription. Too Long helps to fund our journalism year-round and allows us to keep our YouTube videos free. So we really do appreciate your support.